The moment I heard the grinding of metal and the sharp squeal of a golf cart slamming into my closed driveway gate, I knew things had gone far beyond ordinary HOA pestering. Through my security camera feed, I could see HOA Vice President Patricia Hawthorne sitting behind the wheel of her beige club car, having just driven it straight into my wrought iron fence in what she would later claim was an effort to enforce visibility compliance. Her passenger, HOA Treasurer Gerald Morrison, held a laminated copy of the bylaws, like it was some sort of magic shield, while shouting about standing ground. I slowly sipped my iced tea, saved the security footage in several places, and told myself that felony trespass charges were about to make Patricia's day a whole lot more interesting. But let me step back and explain how this began. My name is Robert, and I moved to Meadow Ridge Estates 3 years ago for peace and quiet. It was meant to be a semi-rural, gated community full of retirees who only wanted to enjoy their golden years. As a retired logistics coordinator turned amateur metalworker, I valued my privacy, my punctuality, and above all my control over my own property. The home I bought had a long driveway that curved away from the street, giving me the seclusion I had wanted after decades in crowded offices. Then came Patricia Hawthorne, a 58-year-old former DMV manager who had retired early to, in her words, restore neighborhood order. She saw herself as a suburban commander, always joined by Gerald Morrison, an accountant with the personality of wet cardboard. Their grudge against me began 6 months ago, when I put in a 7-foot automatic gate across my driveway. The previous owners had already installed the posts, so I simply added the gate mechanism. Patricia instantly called it a non-conforming barrier that ruined the visual harmony of the neighborhood when I asked her to show me the bile. Oh, stating I could not have a gate, she mumbled about implied standards and stomped away. The HOA then started what I can only call a full bureaucratic siege against my home. In the first month, I got 5 different letters listing made-up violations, including aesthetic obstruction, gate aggression, and my favorite, hostile automation. Patricia even brought one citation in person at 6:12 in the morning, wearing a reflective vest and whistling the Jeopardy theme while taping it to my gate. When I formally asked for a copy of any bylaw that listed gate height limits or banned automated gates, Gerald sent me a 23-slide PowerPoint called Gates, the Silent Dividers, that was full of clip art and goofy slide transitions. I refused to open my gate for their so-called inspections, which was completely within my rights as a homeowner. And that is when the nighttime stakeouts started. I caught them on my cameras, sitting in their cars just outside my property line at all hours, taking pictures and scribbling in legal pads. One Tuesday evening, I saw them measuring the distance from my gate to the street with a laser tool while arguing over whether it violated some fake setback rule they had made up that very day. Things came to a head on a Sunday afternoon when I returned from the hardware store to find Patricia and Gerald parked right in front of my gate with binoculars and a tape measure. When I confronted them from my car, Patricia snapped that they were doing a proactive compliance audit. I told them they were doing harassment and that they should leave before I called the sheriff. Gerald muttered about knowing their rights, while Patricia took photos of my license plate as if she did not already know exactly who I was. Then came their biggest mistake. The next Wednesday night, my motion sensors caught movement near my gate at 11:30. I checked my security feed and saw Patricia and Gerald sneaking through the wooded area beside my property carrying a crowbar and what looked like bolt cutters. Patricia was dressed in all black like a suburban ninja, and Gerald wore a headlamp that made him look like a lost miner. They came at my gate from the inside after trespassing through my neighbor's yard and the tree line to avoid the street cameras. I watched them try to pry open my gate with Patricia yelling something about official HOA leverage authority, which I am pretty sure. He is not a real thing. They triggered the gate's emergency lockdown protocol, which made the lights flash, the sirens blare, and a recorded voice say, "Trespasser detected, authorities notified. Please remain where you are." Patricia screamed loud enough to wake half the neighborhood. Gerald dropped the crowbar, stumbled backward, and ran straight into my prized rosebush. Gerald got tangled in the thorns while shouting about his allergies, and the sheriff's department arrived in 8 minutes, which might have been a record for our area. I met them at my gate with a thumb drive holding all the security footage, along with a folder of every harassing letter from the HOA and a certified letter I had sent 2 weeks earlier stating Patricia and Gerald were not allowed on my property under any circumstances. The deputies watched the footage right there in their patrol car while Patricia stood beside them gripping her HOA badge like it gave her special immunity. She claimed they were doing safety assessments and that HOA officers had implied easement rights to access any property for compliance checks. The senior deputy, a no-nonsense woman named Deputy Collins, stared at her like she had grown another head and asked if she truly believed HOA positions meant she could break into a property with burglary tools in the middle of the night. Gerald, still pulling thorns from his khakis, tried to claim the crowbar was for emergency gate release only, which made even less sense than Patricia's excuse. Both Patricia and Gerald were taken into custody for criminal trespass and attempted property damage, and as they sat in the back of separate patrol cars, I saw neighbors gathering to watch HOA Board President Linda Bennett, who had been strangely absent during all the earlier trouble, stood in her driveway wearing a bathrobe and typing frantically on her phone. By the next day, she had distanced herself and the HOA from Patricia, saying it was a rogue operation that violated HOA protocols. The board held an emergency meeting that Thursday, and I went with my lawyer. The room was packed with neighbors who had also suffered from Patricia's petty rule for years. People stood up one after another, sharing stories of harassment, bogus fines, and invented violations. An older man named F. Rank said Patricia had fined him $300 for having dandelions she called non-conforming flowering weeds. A young couple said she had measured their garden gnome and declared it 4 inches too tall, ordering its removal or threatening daily fines. My lawyer showed the security video, the harassment records, and a cease and desist letter that warned any more contact from Patricia or Gerald would bring more legal action. He also presented the sheriff's report, which included Deputy Collins' note that Patricia seemed to be trying forced entry with criminal tools. The board voted to suspend Patricia and Gerald until a full review could be done, though everyone knew no review would happen because they were finished. The criminal case went forward for 2 months. Patricia hired an expensive lawyer who argued she thought she had authority as an HOA officer to check properties for safety concerns. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Sarah Chen, destroyed that defense by proving HOA rules required owner permission for any property access and that breaking in with tools at midnight could never count as a real inspection. She also showed proof that Patricia had been warned many times she had no right to enter my property. Gerald took a plea deal, quickly agreeing to testify against Patricia for reduced charges. On the stand, he said Patricia had planned this for weeks and had researched how to disable different automatic gates online. He showed text messages where she laid out her plan to force open my gate to prove I was hiding some kind of violation. The text even said if they did it late enough at night, I would never know, which clearly showed criminal intent. The jury took less than 2 hours to decide Patricia was guilty of criminal trespass, attempted breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit property damage. The judge, calling it a grotesque abuse of perceived authority, sentenced her to 18 months in prison with parole possible after 6 months plus $10,000 in fines, and required anger management classes. When the sentence was read, Patricia's face went from red to white to purple. She stood and yelled that this was a conspiracy against dedicated community servants, but her lawyer pulled her down. As the bailiff came with handcuffs, Patricia looked at me with pure hatred and said this was not over. The judge heard this and added 3 more months for threatening the victim in court, making her total 21 months. Her jaw dropped in shock, and for the first time since I had met her, Patricia Hawthorne was completely silent.